In the beginning, 13 Titans, elemental entities of ultimate power, created the mortal races, humans, orcs, elves, and others, as well as monsters. But soon they were bored, and created the Jinn, creatures of intense powers. Still not satisfied, they set out to create gods. The Titans mistreated the gods, abused them, and even killed some of them on a whim. But the gods found that they drew power from their mortal worshippers, and they fought back. A brutal war ensued that ended in a destroyed landscape and the gods triumphant. The Titanspawn creations were abandoned by their creators and forced to beg for their existence by the divine races who supported the gods. 150 years later, the land has finally begun to heal, but war is once again brewing, this time between the mortal races. Scarred Lands is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition supplement by Onyx Path, and published in 2016. It is based on a popular setting that got its start in 2000, and this most recent iteration is also available with Pathfinder rules. The world of Scarred Lands is called Skarn, and most of its population live on one of its 5 continents, called Gelspad. A quite detailed history in the book explains the political and military fallout amongst mortal races in the decades after the Great Divine War between gods and their creators, the Titans. In the present day, 150 AV, or after victory, a new continental war is brewing, as several rulers have finally consolidated enough power and wealth. In this complex world, there are 7 nations that make up the Calastian hegemony, an alliance of questionable intent ruled by a single king, and 9 free nations. There are also 20 independent city-states. All the nations and city-states come with about half a page of detail, enough to get a general idea. The races of Scarred Lands are built more powerfully than in the core D&D 5th edition books. The dwarves, elves, and halflings have been given 1 or more extra traits, and the new unique races are all relatively amped up at level 1. The authors did not include half-elves or half-orcs. The story behind the new unique races is that they were created by the Titans as playthings and later modified to fight in their war against the gods of Skarn, but after losing the war, these races were pardoned by the other mortal races and allowed to live on. Asathi, a bipedal serpentine race, once conquerors but now freed from the dark will of their creator. Despite their appearance, Asathi do have some good relations with other races, and many are adventurers. Hollow Legionnaire. Less a race and more a construct, a Hollow Legionnaire is the soul of a fallen warrior, inserted into a bound suit of armor. The entity has only a very spotty memory of its soul's former life, but does have its own set of fears, hopes, emotions, etc. Its creation occurs at one of 5 great spires that sit at the heart of the Gleaming Valley. Ironbred, an upright horse-like people who, like the snake-like Asathi, have forsaken their evil roots and tried to build a society for themselves. They have to contend with holdouts from their own past, who still live life as bloodthirsty raiders. Manticora, lion folk who also struggle to put together a society for themselves after their Titan creator abandoned them. They have a mixed reputation due to some elements of their race being vicious and merciless. Orc. The orcs of Skarn are complex, almost refined creatures with culture and religion, though they tend to be semi-nomadic and tribal. They enjoy widespread acceptance by the other races. Slytherin. The rat folk of Skarn adapted most successfully to integrated life in cities and towns after the Divine War, but being a relatively young race, have little in the way of culture or history. As far as the standard races, each of them are described as belonging to one of several subcultures or phenotypes within each race. Of the 11 original 5e classes included, Scarred Lands adds a ton of new class options. There are also new spells for all the casting classes. Obviously, the new spells overlap in terms of classes, but there are still a lot of new spells to consider. Barbarians have 3 paths. Bards have 2 different colleges to choose from, as well as 16 new spells. Clerics have 5 domains and 19 new spells. Druids have 2 circles and 16 new spells. Fighters can choose from 2 archetypes. Monks have a Way of Mercy. Paladins have 4 orders and 7 new spells. Rangers have 9 new spells. Rogues have 2 new archetypes. Sorcerers have 3 new origins and 21 new spells. Warlocks have 2 pacts and an otherworldly patron, as well as 13 new spells. And wizards can choose from 2 new arcane traditions and have access to 44 of the new spells in the book. Are all of these spells completely novel and exciting? No. There's no way for that to ever be the case with 53 new spells meant for D&D 5th edition gameplay. But a list like this always has some standouts, such as Moonlight Curse, and Instant Wardrobe, and Shadow Traitor. The authors do add a subset of spells called True Rituals, which are difficult for characters to learn and require multiple casters to actually execute. There are 10 of these, and each of them are obviously quite powerful, and can only be called upon once per day by players. A couple of examples include Raise the Temple, which pretty much does just that, and Divine Aspect, which confers a host of different divine powers depending on the god to which the ritual was directed. There are also a number of so-called prestige classes, which act as a specialized multi-class with some level, stat, and story requirements. The Adamant Champion is a level 11 plus paladin class who is closely tied to the kingdom of Korean. When you level up as an Adamant Champion, you gain a very powerful sword and up to 4 specialized blessing spells. The Banneret is a powerful mounted class who must be proficient in medium armor, animal handling, and have knighthood of some kind or another. Leveling up as a Banneret confers benefits related to your mount, whether it be a horse, a goat, or a dragon. Other prestige classes include the Incarnate, a sort of reincarnated druidic lifeform, the Runecaster, Spellbow, and Tattoo Adept, all of which have some steep character requirements. The book offers 26 new feats to choose from, many of which add some intriguing gameplay mechanics. The Mark of the Fallen feat has a mechanic for 13 different Titan marks, which is particularly interesting if you are going whole hog into the world of Skarn. Although the Titans were defeated 150 years ago, they still exist, and they still have underground support, so to bear the mark and wield their power openly is an interesting in-game choice. The Pious feat is also closely tied to the setting, since it involves worship rituals for one of the major living deities who still roam the land. The book includes about 150 magic item descriptions. They are fun and varied and plentiful, although I personally would have appreciated a rollable table from which to choose one of these items. The sheer volume of pages of descriptions is a bit overwhelming. Organizations in Scarred Lands are like guilds or orders, which each have their own rules for membership, beliefs, ideologies, duties, privileges, and leadership structure. They are intended to be used as a backdrop for players to get more personally involved in the living, breathing, post-war world that the book presents. These organizations are sorted out into the categories of arcane, criminal, death, devotional, mercantile, military, and political. There are 14 such organizations detailed in the book, 2 from each type, and once you read through all of their details, you have in your head more than enough ideas to launch and sustain dozens of potential quests, ranging anywhere from infiltrating a secret society of witch hunters, to settling debt with the richest house in the continent, to being on one side or another of a death contract involving a morbid god and his awful followers. There is ample description of dozens of different locations and features across the landscape for players to venture out to and explore, which are outside of the capital cities and city-states. Many of these geographical zones were shaped in the cataclysmic war between the Titans and gods 150 years prior. Some of these places are imbued with various kinds of power and energy. It would take months and years of playthrough to fully explore each of these locations. There are 62 so-called Titanspawn, or adversarial creatures, detailed at the end of the book. The illustration quality ranges from inspiring to less than inspiring, but the number of unique creatures does make for a fascinating read. Some of the most notable are the Slytherin. These ratfolk, which are also a playable race as mentioned earlier, are given their own society and leadership structure, and come in 5 different types as NPCs or monsters. The hags of the world of Skarn are also lovingly detailed, being larger than that of the original 5e lore, and include some individually named hags that you can drop right into your campaign. Due to being around for a decade and a half, the setting of Scarred Lands is very well realized, and comes with more than just a cataclysmic history and historical tapestry. The gargantuan number of new spells, class variants, and magic items, as well as the prestige classes and true rituals, offer players and GMs a lot of mechanics to play around with beyond the scope of this book's foundation of D&D 5th edition. It serves as a pretty good model for anyone out there thinking of creating their own setting for Hasbro's flagship RPG, bringing both a rich history filled with titans and gods, as well as a lot of different actual playable mechanics to chew on. Anyways, there you have it, Scarred Lands. Links are down below. Thanks for listening and watching. This is Dave signing off. See ya.